Welcome to the SnoWest Show. I am Ryan Harris, publisher of SnoWest and host of the SnoWest podcast. This is I keep going back and saying this is something new we're doing, but if we're over a year into it, is it still new?
I don't think so.
I don't know. All right, this is something we're doing. I'll just abbreviate it to that.
Standard procedure.
So to give you a little backstory, we're at Heydays. It is Saturday afternoon. Arctic Cat just released their new motor for the Catalyst, the 858, and we also got to go tour the St. Cloud engine facility yesterday as media and learn a lot about this engine. Troy Halvorson, what's your role at Arctic Cat?
I'm Director of Product Strategy for snowmobiles.
Okay, and then we have our lead engineer, Andy Beavis.
Mountain team manager, mountain guy.
Yeah, but you're responsible for the Alpha Rail. You got a lot of credit going into this whole Catalyst program, right? Everything that's built up there.
I'm sadly one of the old guys, I guess, working on the Catalyst now. I hate thinking about that. But.
Yeah. And then we have PJ.
Yep.
Can you introduce yourself there, if you don't mind?
Yep, Philip Jant. I am the Vice President at Arctic Cat, new in the role about 3 weeks.
So Heidi McNary, she's still with Textron, right?
Yes.
Where did she move to?
She moved to Macaulay Systems. They make propellers for aircraft, for piston engine aircraft.
Okay.
So she's over on that side of the business. That was where she originally started her career, was on the aviation side of the business, so she moved back over there.
All right. So give me like a brief rundown on your history with Arctic Cat, with Textron.
So I've been with the company 25 years. I was a high school football coach, and just out of the blue, one of the guys taught his kids, worked for EasyGo back at the time, and offered me a job, and I started working there. I've been in sales, worked in our product development side, led our strategy group. When we originally made the Arctic Cat acquisition, I was director of sales for about 7 months. Then I took another role in the business, and then just in the last 3 weeks, moved back over on the Arctic Cat side. So it's good to be back. I'm really super excited to get back on this side.
So you relocated up to Minnesota?
Nope. I'm still. I live in South Carolina. We have our corporate offices in Georgia, but I'm in Thief. I think 2 of the 3 weeks that I've been in the role, I've been in Thief River. So I'll spend a lot of time in Thief River. And, a big part of it is I want to get on the road and spend a lot of time with our dealers and our customers and see what's going on and what we're doing right and what we need to do better.
Well, you've got a lot of model segments I'm sure you're aware of in the lineup, but there's really 2 that matter. Mountain and not mountain.
Got it. Okay.
So we need to get him out to Island Park to the facility.
Yep. Have you been out there?
I have not.
Yeah. We've had a lot of Textron people out riding the product in Island Park, and they usually come away as much impressed with the location and stuff as the product, but we'll get you out.
I was actually scheduled to go to Island Park, and about 3 weeks before the trip was planned, they reassigned me to a different role, and it was like just shot that out of the air. So I've been looking forward to getting back. I've been to that area many, many times, but I've not ridden out there, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, hopefully we get another year like last year. We were up in Island Park. We were sitting in Cafe Sabor with the weekend after we did that intro at your shop up there. And we're sitting at the window seat, and you must have had a group of Textron employees out there, but I think about 15 of you went by with about 8 catalysts on there. That was before the embargo, too, but that was funny. Just sitting there, just grabbing dinner, and there you go.
Nice.
So, Troy, we talked this time last year at Heydays, just about the Catalyst platform and how that came to be, the development process and all that. Obviously, you're working on this engine at the same time.
Yep. The engine had to start a little later due to a lot of the parts that we were expecting to get to start the development process with. For example, I don't know if we talked about this last year, but originally the Catalyst, when it was going to come out, was going to have the 858 first. That was the intention. And then, the lead time or the development time for a brand new engine is quite long. So you expect to get certain parts at a certain time so that you can meet your development timeline.
Especially for winter and snow.
Yeah, winter. I mean, we got to work around winter. We can only do so much during the off season. So we missed the critical window with getting parts. So we had to make a call that we either take the project and put it on hold for another year, the Catalyst, or we introduce the 600 in the Catalyst first and then the 858 after. So we couldn't get it started exactly when we wanted to, but once we got the parts in, then started rolling with it. We had a group of engineers that were working on the 858 that were separate from the guys that were working on the 600.
Yeah.
How close were you to holding on to the catalyst until this year, till right now?
And to wait
hold the platform until you had the 858 this year.
It really wasn't an option. We were not gonna wait with the catalyst. We knew our customers expected something different. And we were excited to get it out there. And so, are you saying if we would have delayed the entire program?
Yeah. Wait, and then today would have been the whole catalyst.
Yeah,
reveal,
no,
but it would have been an 858.
Yeah,
that was a discussion, but that was a really short discussion.
Yeah,
it's
was
more,
short.
how do we get the 600, pull it ahead, get it out first. And to your original point, yes, we were working on the 858 engine and multiple scenarios of bore stroke engines in the catalyst as it started. Yeah. So the 858, in my world, in the design world, in the layout of the chassis and the laydown, all the things we talk about, it comes from the bottom up, and absolutely the big motor was in there from the start. And actually the 600 was a kind of a transition, a flip. Let's pull that ahead. Let's focus the effort on there. The calibration team, everybody get them, because they were already doing stuff towards the 858, and we had to refocus efforts towards the 6 to make it right.
So COVID couldn't have hit at a worse time for you guys, for Arctic Cat fans and Catalyst and everything, right? Because that ultimately, that supply chain problem messed up 858 production, I'm assuming. What parts were hard to get from suppliers that ultimately delayed the 858?
I think the crank was probably one of the first ones.
And we don't want to put our suppliers out and call them out, but it's not even sometimes our suppliers. Yeah. It's their suppliers. Like, they couldn't get the aluminum alloys to make the cylinder or whatever it is. But it was a lot of those long lead time parts, crankcases, cylinders, pistons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Aluminum was impossible to get. Extruded stuff. We were seeing rail beams and stuff on other brands that had like defects on it in the extrusion, but it was just going to production because you had no other choice.
Yeah. It was interesting when the COVID first hit. We had guys that we said, "Hey, you can't come and work because you need to stay away." And I think there was guys that were probably working on their own, weren't they?
Yeah, it actually was a big boost to the whole flexibility and working from home, because guys would not stop working. Like, I've got a laptop, I'm at home, I'm going to work on it. We had a big push. I can't even remember what year it was now, but we needed to get data, for the next round of chassis revision and to drive the FEA and all the stuff we can do in the summer, lab testing, destructive testing. We actually had to go to Cook City in June with fully data act sleds, and we basically had to get permission from, for sure, at least the top of TSV. Like, we need 4 people to go to the middle of nowhere, work on this for a week, get this data so we can come back and the development doesn't stop. And Dan Johnson really allowed that to happen, although I just about had to choke it out of him. But he made it happen. We got the data, and that would have pushed us a year. Easy.
And that's like the seasonality you're talking about, like a motorsport, a power sport group that doesn't depend on winter can test year-round and develop year-round because they just go somewhere else. But
we can put wheels on sleds, we can do a lot of stuff, and we do all that, but to get the actual input loads from the field, especially in that heavy wet spring snow, good traction. Troy knows all about it from her years of testing and cooking, breaking stuff that didn't break in the soft snow and the hard snow. The slush was really a condition that we needed to get data for the drivetrain and some of the suspension and chassis loads. So it was, to Troy's point, it was a big team effort. Nobody wanted to stop. People like, I don't care about COVID, I'm working on it, or I want to work on it. And just what was going on at the time was like, no, we can't do this, can't do that, but they never stopped.
Yeah, it was crazy because you think about not only COVID like a couple years ago or 3 years ago, but it was 2 springs ago, not this last spring, the spring before, that we were all planning on a trip to go out to Cook City, and you guys got flooded. Or not you guys, but Cook City or Yellowstone Park was shut down.
It
was like, what?
That's our place, and it's shut down. We got reservations. They got everything blocked out. We can't get there. We're going to helicopter in. oh, Textron has helicopters, help us out. Get all those guys at work. We build helicopters. Tell them to send a fleet of them up here. Tilt rotors, haul us in there.
I don't think the residents of Cook City would have been very happy with us being
No,
there.
probably not.
No,
Eating
I
the food,
imagine
and it's like, go away. We're getting a disaster here.
not. Okay, so with surrounding the 858 reveal today, so you now have a big twin in the Catalyst, and we'll talk about the advantages that you guys have: power to weight ratio, lay down engine, low CG. But the two big questions, I know people that are listening are just like this. Two questions: why not a 900 or bigger?
Yeah, kind of talked about it today a little bit. To get a bigger bore would have required larger pistons, larger cylinders, and it kind of goes against what we were looking for with the Catalyst, to keep it as tight and sexy as possible. And we've had big bores before. We know what happens with them, that if you don't do the right things, you're going to have durability issue. If you do the right things, you're going to get bigger and wider, and so I think that was pretty much the main thing that drove it, that we wanted to get the right bore, right stroke, so that we get the horsepower we wanted, but keep the weight what we wanted and keep the durability that we needed.
Yeah, and we had all kinds of discussions. We had, layouts for different sizes and all the positives and negatives of them. Like, if we go 900 and we do the bore stroke we believe is right, this is what the engine will be. If we go, 820, 830, 840, 850, 860, these different ranges, the sweet spot with the piston size that drove a lot of stuff. And we're not the engine guys. Some of this is kind of secondhand from the guys that I bother all the time, but we didn't want the piston bigger. And a lot of that comes from Suzuki heritage and kind of where they pushed us on the C-Tech motors originally, and all that history that we're kind of building into our own stuff now still, years later. We didn't want the piston bigger, and I was one of the guys, I remember the M7. I remember when we were the little guys beating up on the big guys, and I was like, let's do an 800, a new 800, smaller bore, longer stroke. But it turned out that the sweet spot is our piston is about as big as we dare go for durability, piston speed, prone to detonation, all those things. And then the stroke ends up at 858, and it was that was the right spot.
So the same diameter bore as the 800.
Yep.
And increased your displacement through the stroke.
Yep. But, and it wasn't just because that was the bore, but I think with Suzuki, that bore ended up being that bore because of their knowledge and history on what they wanted for piston size, for that RPM, for generally those stroke ranges. So
you're not the engine guy, but you know this. This is an over square motor. What happens when you go bigger diameter bore, shorter stroke, and you get to that square point?
As it was explained to me, fuel burns at a set rate, given a fuel type and all that stuff. And if you make the piston too big, you can't efficiently burn all the fuel in the cylinder. Bigger piston, more prone to dome heat, prone to detonation. The turbo guys run, say, 19 pounds on a 6, 17 pounds on a 7, 15 pounds on an 8, with all the same fuel. Some of our race guys, and because the piston and the size kind of dictates a lot of the combustion. And that was the biggest piston that I think we were comfortable with. And going back to some of what Suzuki did in the old days, our old 900 was a bigger piston, and there was a lot of differences from this engine: bigger, wider, heavier. So bigger piston, bigger counterweights, wider cylinders, bigger cylinders. So this was the sweet spot, compromising between the engine group and the chassis group, and where we figure is the best engine to build the best snowmobile, not just the number. And that's why it's 858. We want to be honest. We want to be reliable and trustworthy, and it's an 858, and I don't have any concerns about putting it up against the other motors.
And maybe it's just because I've come through that era of having 900 twins and 1,000 twins, but I like exactly what you're talking about. Small package, and it works because it's in the Catalyst. Like that is as small of a chassis you can build, at least from what I've ever ridden. It does remind me of the M7. It's so small and compact and slim that you're not throwing any weight around, and it's so centralized that the 600 is very impressive compared to an 800 or an 850.
Right. And
It was fun riding with guys that, like when we do snowshoot every year, we're riding 600s with all the other mountain sleds out there, and it's bigger bore. And I'm not the greatest mountain rider, but I like to ride in the mountains, and it was cool to see that I could take a 600 and go everywhere everybody else was going. It was like a tractor. I mean, just kept going, and that proved to me that it's not all about just the engine. It's the whole package. It's how the platform works. So now when we have that added horsepower, it's just going to be that much better.
Right, power to weight is going to be really impressive on this thing. But that leads to the next question, and you guys know what it is: factory turbo. Where are you at on that? That's what a lot of people are expecting today. Is that in the plans? I know that's so far down and out in the scope, but I got to ask.
Well, from a product strategy side, we look at the market, we look at where the sales are. We see that people are really gravitating to a lot of the two-stroke turbos, and they're getting better. It's stuff that we have to pick our battles. I would be pretty naive to say that the customers don't care and that they'll just buy our sleds and not worry about a turbo. I think it's something that we have to be sensitive to and that we have to push for. I can't tell you when we're going to have it or what the level of development is on it, but it is something that we pay attention to. I guess that's the best answer I can give.
You guys sold out of the M600 in a matter of hours.
Yep.
Right. So there is some truth to what you're talking about. The chatter in the industry is that's not a big enough motor. There's no factory turbo, but I mean, shoot, you sold a 600 in a couple hours. This 858 is going to sell out.
Yeah, I mean, we sold the 600 in a couple hours because people like you, magazines, customers, people we brought out to photo shoot, that word of mouth, that real world, hey, this thing is legit. It's a lot of fun to ride, and we've got people at our shop that ride the Blast for work, and they have fun on it. They have fun being that little guy like Peck, Alan Peck. And everybody's like, how the heck did you get here? Your sled's running on one cylinder. He's like, thank God, because that's all she's got. So, I mean, the 600 sold because it's so new and cool and people want to have it. On the other hand, the 858, that's too much sled for some people. Of course, there's people that can ride turbos. I love riding turbos, aftermarket, race gas, everything. But it's kind of maybe in Troy's world, the meat of the market. It's the biggest piece of the pie for the greatest number of riders. And
I'd back up on that. It isn't the greatest number. It's just getting big enough that it's getting attention.
Yeah, it's definitely not the biggest number, and the sweet, like you're saying, the sweet spot where people would enjoy the sport the most is 850 NA.
Yep.
And the lighter that sled can be, the more fun you'll have, and the longer in the day you'll be able to ride and enjoy yourself. There's times on riding a factory turbo where it's super fun for about an hour and a half, and then you're just like, are we done yet? I'm tired.
Well, I've heard guys like you, and I mean, you've been doing this your whole life, and you're like, some of those days I can feel the weight of the turbo, I can feel the height, I can feel the inertia and how it wears on you, just even the pull on the handlebars for those quick shots. But the 858 thing that's going to just drive people wild is that it's lighter than the 6. It's got that much power than the 800. And we didn't ruin what the Catalyst 6 that you guys all rode. Not you, but some of especially the more Eastern guys, they're like, geez, I hope when you put that big motor in there, it's not going to ruin this feel. Like, is it going to be, it's going to make it top heavy? Is it going to be lifty in the corner? And no, it's going to be better.
And I feel like going to say an 890 or something with a bigger diameter jug and everything. Like, people don't realize that 7 pounds on a motor feels like a 30-pound heavier sled sometimes. Like it just doesn't move right.
Well, it was surprising then when I got to, prior to working on the mountain team, I worked on the performance team, but I get to go out and ride out west, and I'd ride the M1000, and there was no day that I would rather ride an M1000 than an M8000. It was just that little bit of weight, even though it had more horsepower. It just wasn't as fun for me, So you're right in that just that much weight up front plays a huge factor on how that sled handles. So,
and to make the bigger engine run, it takes a different pipe, which is bigger, more volume, more weight. Just stack. So yeah, even the rotating weight and the things I think you're getting at, you start stacking all the parts on top of each other, and you start with a bigger block at the bottom, it just makes a bigger package, and that was not what we were going for.
That's one. It's one of the things we asked yesterday. You were talking about the motor, the 858 is lighter than the 600, and we were like, okay, does that include the exhaust and everything? Like,
yes, and yes, it's the block. The engine long block is lighter. The engine power plant with the exhaust and the intake will be lighter, and the snowmobile will be lighter than the 600.
And the gearing, I don't know. That's probably not something we can really talk about anything there. But the power plant is just being lighter than the 600 is impressive, especially that 600, where it's already so low in that sled. Like we were talking about on our ride, just how we were up on Two Top, kind of that place that we always go, that Shay always drags us into the trees. And it's just the ideal area for mountain riding. Like, you got to get PJ up there. Like, it's the place to go, because it's hard to get to off the bottom. And then you just pop into this, and the trees are spaced out just perfectly where you can keep speed and you can pick lines, but you got to be on your toes. Like, you got to ride. And we had 800 ascenders in that group, and the 600s were just doing everything the 800s were except for the long distance pulls. Mm-hmm. But it was just so much less effort to get to the same place.
Yep.
It was just so fun. It felt like the M7.
Yeah, and that's what I say. That's what's going to blow people away, is seat of the pants, riding that 6 this winter, and then maybe getting on a demo for the 858 later in the winter, and saying that it's everything it was and better. No compromise. No more body roll. No more, CG height that makes it feel more like a turbo competitor sled versus their NA. It's lower, it's lighter, and it's got more power.
It goes a long way. PJ, I have a question for you.
Okay.
You've been with the company or you've been in this position for a couple of weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yep.
What's your 5-year plan with the Arctic Cat brand?
Let me write this down so that I can.
I think we've just got to be smart. I think the guys have a really good plan in place right now. Continue to invest in the right things. Listen to the customers. What the customers are looking for. And I think sometimes, when you're doing VOC work, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think it's these guys do a great job of sometimes it's like you don't know you need something until you get it. And I think some of the things these guys are working on are going to create that for the customer, and just keep growing the business. I mean, one of my main priorities right now is to grow in our channel. We need to grow our dealer network, especially out west. And I think now with this 858 and pilot on top of the 600 that came out, that'll start shipping this fall, I think it gives us a leg up that we can go into the dealers, and we do have the latest, greatest, newest sled out there that makes it relevant in that western space. So that's going to be our focus, is continue to grow the network, get great channel partners, piling great product on top of that, and just continue to grow the brand overall.
Yeah. Did you write that down, Troy?
I got it right up here.
All right. Nailed it. That was good. And he mentioned out west. Like, awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I've got a request. And I'm not a consumer, I'm media, but there's something I'm hearing a lot of. But this is what I would love to see. Can we do a spring order option for a twin rail and an Alpha? Same sled, same build level. Let the customer pick twin rail or Alpha?
That is something that we will think about.
Okay, write that one down too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Troy, write that down so you can tell me about it later.
You know where Alpha came from, right?
I know. That's Mr. Alpha right there,
Yeah.
green shirt.
When we were in the mountain team together, and he first started doing the project, and he said, "Hey, I want to do a prototype skid frame," and I'd just gotten a roll, and I was like, "That's fine, go ahead." Those type of things, you don't know what you don't know, so you got to start trying different things and take an idea and take it to fruition and see if it's got value. The first prototype he did, it was like, wow, this has got a lot of value. So I'm prior military, Alpha Bravo, Charlie Delta, Delta Foxtrot, all that, military language. So Alpha Bravo, Zanny Beavis.
There you go.
And then the marketing team got it and it became Alpha One. So
no, the Alpha skid is the superior flotation, superior mountain setup. What I think I'm seeing just in my position here in the industry is people are scared to go that route because it's different and because they've hopped on a buddy's and it was a little squirrely. It didn't have enough seat time to get used to it. But I think some of those people would start out going back to Arctic Cat with the twin rail and then advance from there and say, okay, yeah, the Alpha is the next step up.
Yeah, and what PJ said is right. It's voice of customer. You hear enough people tell you that, hey, I like a twin rail. You better start thinking about how you should do a twin rail as well. I mean, the customer is the one that makes a decision with their wallet and their checkbook, and not to say the customer is always right, but if the customer is looking for something and we can provide it, then why wouldn't we? So that is something we're looking at.
Yeah, for sure. And Troy and I have talked about it. You know, some of our race guys still run twin rails for, you know, the big mods and stuff, you know, Tapios and the guys that we work with pretty close. And we've had the discussions lots of times. And it's tough for me because, you know, I love the Alpha. I see the value in it. It's tough for us because we're the only ones with it. Mm-hmm. Polaris and Skidoo are giants in the industry. They don't have an Alpha. They can't have an Alpha. I mean, but if you want to be honest, they didn't have A-arm suspension. They downplayed it for years. The year our patent ran out, they all had it.
Yep.
And I've seen little bits. Even Timbersled is running narrower skids now, but they're not bragging about it. They're not pushing it, but it's there. It's coming.
So speaking of which, like the Timbersled slide rails, how close can they bring the rails together before they get in trouble?
That's the thing. It's we're pretty smart, I think, on how we did the patent. It's not how close the rails are together. It's a width ratio on the width of the contact patch to the width of the high fax, outside to outside. Okay. So that's why on a snow bike, you can make a narrower skid and not infringe on the Alpha patent, but they're probably bumped up right against it. You know, because we looked at all kinds of tracks and skids from way back, 70s, 60s, trying to figure out how unique is this, you know, what can we do? And that's how all that patent stuff works. But, I mean, mark my words, when the patent expires, the competitors will have narrow rails.
I don't disagree with that because the Alpha is, especially in the Catalyst, and I can only speculate with the 858 and that power, but that's like the Ferrari setup. Some people need like a Camry, you know, but
or like a Dodge Demon, you know, it's the most bad to the bone thing for just doing that one thing. But a Ferrari is a completely different vehicle, you know, or a Corvette.
You know what's interesting about the discussion there, because when we did come out with the Alpha suspension, I struggled with it. I mean, I'll be honest, I was overcompensating all the time. I felt like a fish out of water. And then I stepped away from riding for a little bit because then I worked running the factory, the operation side of things. And then when I came back and I started riding mountain sleds again, that's all I rode was the Alpha. And it was like, wow, I don't know why I would want to go back to anything different. So it was kind of like you got to break that learning curve a little bit and understand that you don't want to ride it the same way you would run a twin rail, because you'll feel awkward. But when you just focus on just riding it, and I think that's why we've seen a lot of like beginner riders that are new to mountain riding that get on the Alpha, and it makes them a better rider right off the bat because they don't have anything that they're comparing against that makes them think they need to bring it over more. I mean, that's just personal observation.
Yeah, they're not getting on the sled and expecting it to do this, and it's doing this.
Yeah.
And that's probably what you're battling with people that are used to a twin rail. And I do agree with it. If they could have a week or 2 weekends in a row on an Alpha, yeah, they would fall in love with it.
Yeah.
But if the only way you can go test it for that long is to buy one, there's a little hesitation there.
Yeah.
And another thing that I'll bring up, I've talked to people about it. One of the worst things you can do is give somebody a first experience on an old clapped out Alpha that the track is torn up. It's not an Alpha thing. It's a long pitch deep snow track thing. They don't last forever. The rods get broke. You know, the wheels on the rears of all the skid frames, Polaris, Skidoo, Arctic, they're all in the same 2 grooves of the track. When you do a tail stand and you come down on a rod and you break a rod, you don't even know because it's inside the track. You'll find out when the track delaminates and comes apart, but those broken rods really hurt the feel of an Alpha. You take a track with a bunch of broken rods and the Alpha feels like the rear tire's flat. Take a new track with stiff new rods that isn't all beat up and you bought it from some Black Cat guy or something that just trashed it. Brand new track feels completely different. And I've talked to so many people now that Alphas have been out there and been old. They're like, man, it just feels like this and this. I'm like, push on your rear track at the rear wheels. Does it move and make a bunch of crunching sounds? Your rods are busted. And I'm sorry, tracks are expensive, but so are tires. And if you want the best experience, you don't want to have a track that's all broken internally. And like I said, long pitch tracks, it's especially the turbos, it's hard on them.
Well, yeah, you've got that much power running through it. We're getting to the point where it's a consumable part of the machine, like a tire.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt the twin rail as much when the rods are broken. On an Alpha, you notice it because the rods are what provides stability to the track. And when they're all loose and broke, it's just like a noodle. So there is that, and I've seen it with people now that the Alpha's been out for a few years, and there's a lot of high mile ones out there, or even low mile ones that guys are standing on the back constantly and coming down and breaking rods. So
well, that's what you buy an Alpha for, because there's so much flipping traction. You can wheelie a 600. Yeah. You get that thing to stand up on it with a hard incline.
146s. I mean, that's the hot thing again. Everybody wants a wheelie.
Yep.
He's the catwalking king. He loves wheeling all the time.
Now we've got about 1,000 pictures of Andy from Snowshoot just wheeling around on that thing. Yeah. All right. Appreciate the discussion. You guys have anything else you want to add to that? Talking about the 858. And
no, it's the same thing we've been saying today. Is the proof is when you get on the sled and how the consumers feel it. And that's why we're going to try, obviously, our plan is to get it out into the field this winter, let people demo it and experience it. So when they're ready to, when we do start our pre-order period, they get a chance to at least ride it before they, put their money down. So it's something that, we're all really excited about. Yep. Like I was going to mention before, but, when you talked about the development and about what's next, almost all our guys up in engineering and women love mountain riding. So they do it on their time off. They will go out, and fortunately we have the facility in Island Park. They'll go out there between Christmas and New Year's on their own dime just so that they can ride mountain sled. So not from just the snow guys, but the off-road guys as well. So we get a lot of feedback, and we got a lot of clever engineers. So we think that we got some good opportunities there with that. So.
Yeah, I like that.
The parts supply in Island Park, as you can imagine, all the trees, all the hidden landmines, all the dirt engineers and our guys. I mean, Carson's one of the worst guys we got. He's got a parts built like mine.
Hey, is Carson worse than Andy, though? Like,
not back in the day, probably, but now. Yeah, now he's worse.
Yeah, I imagine you've had some good parts bills back there.
Jason Howell used to ride me like...
Yeah, I'm obviously biased. Like, we live down the street from your facility. Like, I love seeing the mountain segment influence the rest of the line. Like we're gonna go learn durability. We're gonna go learn handling. We're gonna go learn all of these dynamics of how a new chassis performs and handles in the mountains, and then we're gonna trickle that down to the rest of the line.
I think you saw the first proof of concept was a mountain sled. It wasn't a trail sled first. It was the catalyst was a mountain sled first.
Yeah, and it was hard for me last year launching with the 6. The cross country racing and Zach and the guys doing so well with it, because I was worried that old typical, those flatlanders don't know what they're doing about mountain sleds. But I mean, we've worked with you guys for so long. I mean, we do Alpha, we do things that make sense for the mountain. I mean, we wanted the 858 so bad, but we just had to do the 6, and the focus wasn't really on mountain with the 6, just because of the way the market goes, and like, I think some of your guys are like, I haven't ridden a 600 in 4 or 5 years or something.
Yeah.
And you forget, because you do. It's like when we were all riding 600s with 144s or whatever, and we thought, wow, you go back to that, and if everybody's on the same sled, or if they're all on similar capable sleds and you're having fun, I mean, that's why we all do this.
Well, you're doing something right, because I've been going to Heydays for, I don't know, 20 some odd years. And the two biggest crowds I've ever seen were last year at the Catalyst release and this year at the 858 release.
Yeah,
so
cool.
I'm excited. I mean, back to my childhood. I think I've told you before. I used to have cutouts of Thundercats and Wildcats on my like I was an Hardcat fanboy as a kid, and I just love seeing the direction. Like you guys are strong, you're slim, you've got a fantastic platform. I love it. It's a mountain platform, like it's a dedicated mountain sled, and I just love where we're at and where we're going.
Well, that makes us feel good.
I say we because I'm Arctic Cat.
Yeah, that's awesome. Love it.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yep, thank
thanks
you
for the conversation. Talk to you later.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ryan.